Good afternoon, Scott Baker. Hello, Sierra Holland. It's good to see you both.
Good to be here. Excited to talk about something that's squarely in the middle of many of my conversations right now, so I'm excited.
Great.
Yeah, and I just lost the page that has the number of the field note for today because I just do that for some strange reason. But we're talking about AI and the way leaders talk about AI, and how that has a big effect on how that is actually accepted or rejected in the workplace. And I'm pretty sure if we were in a simulation, would we know that we weren't we're not the people in like Notebook LLM that are just faking a podcast, right?
I hope.
You're sure?
It took a little bit for those podcast hosts to recognize that they were, in fact, not human. They didn't know at first.
I don't know.
I think the first podcast that I listened to them was like like, did you know that we're not real?
Yeah, right.
And you have to, it's interesting though, our team does a weekly podcast through Notebook LM, and you have to prompt it such that it realizes it's not a human podcaster. You have to prompt it such that it understands it is an AI generated podcast, that it has no real world experience, but that it can help relay information in the way that the audio is put together.
In the way that it does, yeah. So we do, and Sierra makes a good point. So we have, our field notes, which is how many of you came to us at Lead Better to talk about the day's field note. And probably if you're watching now live in Substack or elsewhere, that's how you got here. Welcome to you all. Feel free to jump in. We've gotten a lot of feedback on today's field note. In that sense, the Confluence email that we do that is very AI focused in terms of how leaders and organizations work in this new environment. That is also a great Substack newsletter that we put out, and there is a Notebook LM podcast in that world that kind of deciphers all of that. I do have a friend, by the way, who was on a podcast, and a Notebook LM version. He has an unusual name. I noticed that they pronounced his last name 7 different ways in the actual podcast. They without knowing it, because they were just, every time they would say his name, they used a different pronunciation, which is, right. I think ours are all pretty straightforward. So that said, I think we are best equipped to solve, there's a tremendous amount of anxiety, particularly in the last 7 days around AI and the workforce and people quitting big AI companies and people going to work for big AI companies and how companies think about it. And yet here what you have is you have people of, I'm being very gentle to myself. You have people of different demographics. We have different eras. We have different areas of specialty. And so from what we're going to talk about in this field note and from the feedback that you've gotten, and then the hard-hitting questions Mikey's about to hit us well with, Sarah, do you think we can put everybody's existential fears to rest and give them actionable ways to lead their organizations into the future?
No.
Okay.
I'll be direct. No,
not all of it. Okay.
This is too much of a nuanced conversation for us to cover in 15 minutes and allay everyone's concerns. And I think we have to take both the good and the bad in equal measure. And I'm looking forward to digging into that today, talking about some of the nuances that are there. I think obviously.
So where do we start?
Yeah, I think we should maybe start with what the goal of the field note was to cover and the area where we play most. So what's interesting here is the field note is about, if you're in an organization, you're a leader who is tasked with driving AI adoption, we have to think about how we're framing it. Something I've been saying for a long time, even before this field note and before some of the research came out, is that saying it's going to drive efficiency is a poor frame. When we talk about framing, we're talking about saying, what is this thing really all about? And if we have a clear frame that is going to resonate with our team members, that's the frame we should go with. We can't say it's about efficiency and it's about AI innovation and it's about getting more done and it's about elevating your work. When you put all of those frames out there, nobody knows what to pay attention to and they feel like you're trying to pull one over on them. So what is the frame that's going to be actually compelling? Now I have data to back up my initial notion that if you say adopting AI is about efficiency, nobody's going to want to follow you because nobody gets out of bed in the morning and gets excited to be more efficient.
I'm so excited about efficiency. Yeah, right.
But if it's interesting that the study says if you frame it around elevating how people do their work, that people are more willing to follow that, more willing to engage with that it's not about saying it's going to replace the things that you do and now you're going to do new things, which of course would feel scary for anybody to hear. But if it is true, of course we have to do something that is, anytime that we're framing, we should think about what is going to be true for people's experience. We don't want to bait and switch and say it's about elevating work when it is about replacing some of the work that people are doing. So it has to be a true frame, but we should be thoughtful in, can we frame it around elevating the way that people get their work done and making it simpler and more fulfilling to do?
Yeah, and so increasing their agency and their impact. So Mikey, we're ready. Bring it on.
Okay, there's a couple of, I think the main complaint can be reduced to the idea that if you're talking about framing, when I'm thinking about an existential threat, it feels like you're not answering the right question, right?
Yeah.
So there's a giant gap between a leader's focus being on what AI can do and how I can pronounce it properly, and a team's worry about what happens when it does something wrong, or what happens when it does something so efficiently that I'm no longer needed here, right? So I'm going to have to bear the weight of its mistakes, and I'm also going to have to bear the weight of its productivity that is going to outdo me. And so there's an existential threat there, and then there's a real player. So the way that the question is pronounced for us isn't the most important thing to commit to actually protecting employees. I mean, you are at a stage of the conversation where it's like, you know, you're 3 steps further than where most people are on this existential dread part. So shouldn't we back up and talk about this from a different point of view? Like, your framing seems disingenuous to me completely.
I think it's because we're trying to simultaneously engage with the macro conversation and the micro conversation. The macro conversation about, is the adoption of AI going to free us all up to live lives that have better balance? That's a big question that a lot of people have. There is an optimistic view of what AI can do for organizations, but there is in equal measure a doom view. There are plenty of organizations and people who are thinking about, this could be the end of many things. If we put too much power, too much stake in generative AI, what happens to the world? That is, I think, too big for us to solve through a field note and through actionable guidance that we are trying to give, because I don't think any of us know exactly where this is going to go. If you listen to the leading AI innovators, they don't know within a degree of percentage or certainty where this is going to go. I want to live in the here and now, and what leaders can do if they believe that AI is going to be a big part of their organization. And there are a whole host of types of work where AI probably won't be as largely adopted. But for organizations that are thinking about that, that's who we are trying to get to with this field note of, they know their organization has invested a ton in AI innovation. They are under pressure to get their teams to adopt AI because there is a huge overlap in what AI can do increasingly well and with fewer hallucinations, and what their employees are wasting time doing all the time. For those organizations, that's who we're trying to get to with this field note of, how you frame it matters, and efficiency is not the frame. And so I'm not trying to dismiss concerns about it. Does AI spell doom for humans? Does AI spell elevation for humans and a life of leisure? I've read both sides of that. I can't spend all of my time thinking about the macro, because I have to be in the here and now and capitalize on some of what, I use generative AI in a lot of my work. I'm a communicator. It makes sense to be using AI in my job. It also still makes sense for me to continue to write. And I appreciate that our organization has given us autonomy on how do you choose what to use it for. And it's not saying never write something ever again. I have to write well to be able to think well.
Yes, correct.
But there are smaller communications or smaller opportunities where it doesn't make sense for me to be spending as much time on the writing elements as much as the editing elements. And I think, to Mikey's point around bearing the brunt of mistakes, there should always be a human in the loop. I don't think any of us are pushing for humans to be pushed out of the loop of the creation of documents. So I fear I've talked too much on this
No,
podcast.
no, no, no,
I'll
no.
start to dial back.
The amount of wisdom per minute so far has been enormous. So, Mikey, before you get to I don't know if there's the next part of this feedback and questions that we've gotten, but the field note itself, because we try to kind of analyze the field notes each day here on these conversations. And so when it's talking about this idea that there are performance-based anxieties that people have. Will this, AI replace what I'm doing? Is it going to make my job harder? But then there are principle-based ones, and those are some of the ones that are, if you have a team where there's a moral objection to the whole nature of artificial intelligence, some of this is not going to solve all of that. And so then we get to exactly the way that Sarah's been talking about how you communicate and the kind of language you use. And I think the one important point, and Sarah can jump back in here in a minute and actually really enlighten us, because that actually has to be a valid, truthful claim by the leaders. You can't be trying to just switch language to try to make the sale to your team when you actually don't think that that's actually going to be the truth, because they will see through that, I think.
Yeah, so, and I think that's what part of the concern about this is, like, you're going to solve all of this with framing. Like, you're giving advice to people who lack credibility to begin with. You're giving advice to people who have a giant trust gap in their organization, and it sounds like you're saying you're going to solve it with framing. And so we didn't mean to write past that, but framing is a big deal for those who are honestly and genuinely trying to answer this question.
Yeah. I mean, I would say you have to look at the whole picture. I'm never going to advise a leader to frame something in a way that feels good if it is not going to keep them credible for the long term. Like, I am always going to say, what does the truth actually look like for your organization? What does it really look like?
Yeah.
To the degree that we can predict it at this point in time.
Right.
From there, we can build the frame that is going to be most credible for the long term, but still compelling for your group. I mean, and to Mikey's point, and to the point of the field note of moral repugnance in using AI in certain roles, I would compare and contrast my role versus my partner's role. My partner is a special education learning support teacher. I would not recommend that AI replace the work that she is doing. It cannot replace the work that she is doing to de-escalate situations when a child is activated, to help intervene and have that human connection. I'm not advocating for that at all. And it would be foolish to say, AI is going to speed up all of the work that you do and replace the work that you do as a learning support teacher. There is less overlap in the Venn diagrams of what AI is truly good at right now and what her role requires. So it's more about leaning into the human aspects of our roles and getting really excellent at that. She is excellent at de-escalating situations in a way that AI cannot. It can't intervene. It can't understand how to reason with a child who is taking off their backpack and ripping up their notebook because they didn't get their way that day. But AI could help with writing up some of the paperwork in a way that is not, violating sensitive or confidential information. If she has to always write behavioral objectives for each student, she could have an AI agent that makes that process less painful for her and less painstaking. But she's still going to have to be thoughtful about, based on what I know and have observed about this student that only I can see as a human, what are the best behaviors for this student to be working on in the next quarter? So I think there are always going to be aspects of our jobs that it would feel morally repugnant to engage AI in. And we're not advocating for that. We're saying for the ones where there's a lot of overlap and it just makes sense to be adopting AI, here's a way of thinking about it that you should consider what frame is going to be most resonant for your group, but also most credible for the long term.
Well, and I love the way that you frame it around, like, I have to be in the here and now. And I think that is a way for leaders to talk about it, to say, look, there's a lot of things that are changing, even for the C-suite, right, in an organization. Even Sam Altman at OpenAI has said, I kind of believe that there will be an AI CEO of my company to replace me within 18, 24 months, right? So if he's talking about it that way, well, then that's a little weird. But you say, well, wait a minute. Does it have to be that perspective? Because as you said, you can't think, if you're not writing, and you don't want AI to just do all your writing, but if you can have an AI work on certain things, it opens up more time to do more of the significant work. It's not about like, I have nothing to do, so I got to just find leisure time to fill my time. There are so many problems in the world, so many students that need to have more time with their teachers, so many doctors that would love to have more times talking to their patients and not dealing with a lot of the extraneous stuff. I kind of think without it being an overly optimistic sort of metaphor, but when we see mechanisms in sci-fi movies and shows where there's a human, like, I don't know, Pacific Rim, and you've got the guys inside the big machine. If a big machine can make you 100 times more effective and allow you to spend more time being human and creating real change, doing real work, I can look around, in a 5-mile radius around me and think there's enough work for a zillion lifetimes before even this neighborhood is at a level that it should be, right? There's a lot of things to be done in organizations. And I think there's going to be a lot of work that we don't even know yet for human beings to do. And so you need leaders that have a sophistication to be able to speak with optimism, but keep it in the here and now, as you said.
Yeah. And how do you communicate, using probabilities or forecasting, like, here's what's certain.
Very good point.
Here's what's certain. Here's what's likely. Here's what we don't know yet. Here's what's going to continue to evolve over the years ahead. Because we can't promise certainty. We can't.
Right.
So what can we say is certain now? There are certain things that are going to be certain. What's likely? And what can't we talk about yet? What don't we know where it's really going to land and fall? So I can completely appreciate the feedback that we've gotten on this field note in that realm of, why are we not talking about the macro? But my perspective is, I think there's still value in talking about the micro.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, what we do absolutely know is that Sierra and I are real humans, and we're moderately confident that Mikey is, but we're not positive.
Could be a sim. You never know. I think there was another question. Did we want to get to that? I know we typically wrap around now.
Well, it was mainly around the idea of environmental impacts, right? Like how, and it basically is going to question your, like, why would you be talking about framing when there is this huge moral question that has a greater threat to even people outside of your organization?
Yeah, we're not going to be able to cover all of the environmental impacts of AI in the course of this podcast. And it's really not an area where I think any of the three of us are true experts. I've done enough digging and reading because I've gotten this question of, should I even be using AI? Are my personal chats creating enough of a negative impact on the environment? Is it against my values? I think you have to engage with AI in ways that are congruent with your values. So if you're somebody who's really eco-conscious, so eco-conscious that you wouldn't even eat an almond because of all of the water production that goes into it, maybe that is a question for you. Like, if you're somebody who never flies commercially because it bothers you that there is that much of an economic or an environmental impact, then sure, maybe you don't work with AI because it's against your values. You have to make the decisions that are most in line with your own decisions, your own values. So I think the environmental question is an important one for you to consider, and the AI brands that you engage with based on where their data centers are located, it's a much more nuanced conversation. People are quick to jump to the headlines of AI is terrible for the environment. It's worse for the environment if your data center is in a desert than if your data center is somewhere that is able to process water more slowly. Location of data centers matter a whole heck of a ton. I was reading research on how individual users' use of AI is less of the environmental issue, but it's more about the infrastructure of the AI tools themselves and the AI organizations and the decisions that they're making. So I would push for that if that's what your passion is. Again, I think it's a bit outside of the scope of what we're trying to accomplish with field notes on, actionable leadership guidance. But my advice on that is, you're well within your right to have strong opinions on the environmental impact of your actions, and you have to just be consistent with what is consistent with your values. I really was doing some research, and it was saying if you're a heavy user of AI, 100 or so chats per day per year, it is about equivalent to driving 10 kilometers, eating 5 almonds. So consider the scale. And don't read into too much of the hype. I think there are real environmental concerns, but really consider, is it my individual choices? Have I selected a tool or a brand that has put environmentalism into their operations, do I feel comfortable with that? I mean, everybody should be operating under their leadership values every day and making those choices that feel best to them.
Right. Okay. I have let's make it really super practical here before we're in.
Okay.
I hope both of you have a couple minutes. But should Sam Altman have said that specifically about, I even see myself being outpaced by AI, and a CEO is going to be replaced in this organization in the next few years? That's probably not very good framing, is it? Like,
no, it's not very well. I would say nobody would accuse Sam of having been a master communicator in how he frames things, because it's just actually not what he's very good about. And but Sam Altman does not plan for a CEO to replace himself so that he can do nothing. I imagine Sam Altman is always saying, I'm going to spend my time working on the thing that will make what I did before seem like a footnote. That's what he's exactly said. So he would plan to be going on to work on bigger and more meaningful things, regardless of the circumstance. And look, I know people that know Sam really, really well, that I talk to on an almost daily basis. I also have a friend, who had a recent New York Times bestseller called Against the Machine. He lives off the grid. Today, he launched a new campaign, Writers Against the Machine, Readers Against the Machine, where you sign a thing to say, I am never going to use AI. By the way, we never use AI to write field notes. There's probably a little, grammatical checking that might go on in that regard, but there you go. So the point being that when you can have people on different ends of the world saying, well, what kind of work are we going to do in the world? Right. And you're going to end up with people on very different ends. I've kind of worked in the idea to say, well, listen, I have a friend who has another book that just went on the New York Times bestseller. He's like, be the angel in the machine. If we have these things, do the highest possible good with them that we can right now. Because a year and a half ago, we had predictions from some of the very top people saying we're about to see a cratering in the number of radiologists that we need in this country. Well, the number of radiologists and their pay scales have actually gone up over the last 2 years. The projections, even for therapists, are that the numbers of therapists aren't going to be replaced by AI. They're going to be wildly increasing over the next few years. So there's a lot of things that we don't know, as Sierra said. And so I think in the middle of what we say, that's where Sierra and saying communicate probabilities. Don't assume that your optimistic view or doomer view is the certainty. Be wise, have discernment around all of those things, but communicate in reality. And all we can all do is say, well, let's just do the best work we can right now to make the change we want to make in the world and bring as much change to our clients and customers that makes their worlds better. And then we'll see where it all goes. And then I think if you're paying attention, you're going to do just fine.
Great way to ramp us down. Thank you.
Sorry, that's just. I don't. Sarah,
Good wrap. No notes.
All right, we'll talk tomorrow. See you both later.